Hello and welcome to Getting APIs to Work. Today we talk about the 2021 State of the API report by Postman, and joining us for that is Matthew Reinbold of Postman. Hey Matthew, how are you doing?
Hello, I'm doing great.
Thanks for joining. You just recently joined Postman as Director of API Ecosystems, which is an awesome title, I think. And I asked you if you would be willing to share just an overview of the report because I think it's really an interesting thing to look into. It's openly and freely available for everybody to look at, and I think it is an interesting reflection of what's going on in the API space. Can you tell us just a little bit about the report and the motivation behind it and the scope and how many people were participating this year?
Yeah, absolutely. The report is a wonderful opportunity for us to take the temperature of the API landscape. This year, it was the largest and most comprehensive survey of its kind. We had more than 28,000 people respond. And that gives us a tremendous amount of insight as far as what's working, what's not, and what can we share with the audience so that they can make their own API ecosystems better.
And I think it's just an interesting resource for everybody to look at briefly. Like you said, check out the temperature of the API ecosystem, who's doing what, what's popular, what's trending up, maybe what's trending down. And I think it's an interesting thing to just at the very least look at. And I ask you to just briefly go over the key findings so that people can get an idea of what's in there. So let's jump right in and go through the 7 key findings. And the key finding number 1 in the report is the pandemic changed the world and the world responded with APIs.
Absolutely. It probably shouldn't be a shock to any viewer that the pandemic impacted a lot. As decision makers were looking around and trying to figure out how to not only survive but thrive through multiple interconnected crises, they were looking for something that would give them the flexibility, the adaptability, the resilience that they needed during these challenging times. Nobody had the pandemic on their 5-year roadmaps. And so when it came to technology that would give them those properties, those attributes, APIs rose to the top.
Yes, and I think we also discussed that a lot of X-Way and saying that of course, people first they had to kind of tackle whatever emergency they had to deal with. But improving your changeability, improving your resilience, improving the ability to adapt to changing circumstances, that is definitely something that you see a lot. And I wholeheartedly agree that this is definitely an important thing that's going on in this space. Let's look at the
Absolutely.
second key finding. The second key finding is the API ecosystem is global and it's growing.
Yeah, and again, it probably isn't much of a surprise if you just stop and think about it. Like, if more people are choosing APIs to deal with change and uncertainty, then the amount of API activity is also going to increase. At Postman, we have the wonderful vantage point of being able to look out and see the number of requests and the number of collections and workspaces that are being made. And increasingly, we see people trying to respond to this need within their organizations.
And I think what's really interesting there is one of the things that I talk about always when I talk about APIs is the network effect, right? That
Mm.
regardless of what you do yourself with APIs, the more others are also doing APIs, the more value, at least potentially, you will get out of your activities.
You use the word network effect, and that is a fantastic way of describing what we're seeing. Postman started out as just a request and response tool, ping something, see if it's there, see if it responds the way you expect it to. But increasingly, it's that collaboration aspect, it's the team creating things, sharing things, forking things, using that as part of a larger process that we see as the really valuable, sticky part of API development. It's the collaboration aspect to evolve these things together where companies are really finding value.
Yes, I do agree that we see a lot of increasing activity. And I think the third key finding is kind of related to that. So the third key finding is developers are spending more time with APIs. And I think for us, we are so embedded in the API space that for us it's like, yeah, sure, they do. But I think it's
Mhm.
still something where it's not for all developers something that they do all the time. But there is a trend that you can observe.
Yeah. Last year, we saw about 40% of the respondents say, yeah, I spend about half my time on APIs. This year, it's nearing 49%. So just the amount of raw developer time that's focused on APIs, where APIs are the primary or the majority part of their activity at work, it continues to grow.
Yeah. Even though I have to say, since I am a statistics fan, of course your sample is pretty skewed, right? Like the people responding to your survey, I guess, for those who have no touch point with APIs, you just don't get their data.
Right.
But doesn't matter.
No,
I'm sure that this is going up all the time.
I'll freely acknowledge, and for folks in the audience, there is some selection bias, right? Who are we going to send the survey to? Well, we're going to start with Postman customers, and so therefore they're probably API users to begin with. But what's more important than the actual number is the overall trend. So among that same group, we're seeing that upward tick.
Yes, and I think I'm mostly just teasing you. So I think it is definitely a trend that, and like you said, right? If we see data points that show us the trend, that's good enough. The absolute numbers really aren't that important. What's important is the trend.
Right, right,
And
right.
there's another interesting trend that we see in key finding number 4, which is API investments stay strong.
Yeah. Um, it's it's kind of a knock-on effect of the previous numbers. Like if people are finding value in having more flexibility, they're spending more time creating and using APIs, and it's a bigger part of their job, well then there's probably going to be more investment. About the time that we released the report, Gartner also subsequently came out with their CIO report, in which they said that API spending is going to grow about 37% next year. So, you take those two data points and it's like, okay, this is a phenomenon. This is continuing to grow.
Yeah, I do remember that Gartner report coming out and saying, "Well, that's a big increase from a level where it's already pretty high." So it's not like
Yeah.
30 something percent of that is a lot more money. So
Yeah, yeah. For developers who are looking at their career path and trying to figure out like where do they spend their limited amount of training and investment time, like APIs are here. They're going to be around. They're needed, they're necessary. So it's a good place if you are trying to figure out your career path.
that's a very good point. I haven't thought about that from this perspective, I have to admit, but I think it's a very important point, saying that this field is only growing and it will need people who are well informed and good at connecting things. So if you're interested in
Absolutely.
doing something that very, very likely is going to just grow, then that's a good field to be in.
Yeah, absolutely.
But you need to do it well. So, key finding number 5, quality is the top priority.
Yeah, well, what's interesting is as we're looking at the numbers, more people are consuming, more people are producing, and what they're finding is that the expectations are not quite where they want them to be. So, for both producer and consumer, there's a need for a higher amount of quality. And so, how do we get there? There's a variety of different ways, but basically, as we parse the numbers, we're seeing people all across the board, they want more testing. They feel like there should be more testing. There's not enough time for testing. So I think that directly impacts this quality expectation.
Yeah, there never is enough time for testing, so to speak. Or if you automate things enough, right, then there doesn't have to be that much time. So I think we're still definitely going firmly in this direction of more automation, right, making things more effective. And I think quality is one of the important factors that we want to get out of that. Also, faster time to market and whatever. But quality is
Right.
definitely one of the points.
Right. And it's acknowledging that things are a craft. Also, in the report, we see the experience level with APIs remains 2 to 3 years. And then I don't know if these people are cycling out and becoming managers, or they're moving into different areas like cloud ops or frameworks or libraries or whatever. But for whatever reason, year over year, we have the same majority that's a couple years into their professional journey that are the primary API producers, API creators. So APIs are a craft. They do require experience. They do require some work and effort. And so, how can we make those new people, those people that are only a couple of years in, how can we make them more comfortable, more successful, improve that overall quality? I think as an industry, we're still figuring that out.
Yes, I think you're absolutely right. The quality metrics sometimes we still, the number of customers asking, it's like, what kind of KPI should we have? What should we measure? What makes sense? What doesn't make sense? What is maybe counterproductive, right? It's
Right.
still, it's definitely still something we're figuring out. Completely agree.
Right.
Let's move on to key finding number 6. More companies are embracing the API first philosophy. And I know that this one is dear to your heart.
Well, it is. I'll be quick to point out that I do draw a line between API first and API design first. I do readily acknowledge that they are intertwined, or to use a Ted Nelson phrase, intertwingled with each other. Um, However, when we look at the report, we see that companies are saying if we're going to do software, it needs an interface. And it's not something that we're going to bolt on afterwards. It needs to be something front of mind, part of the process as we go out and we build. The trend, as we talked about, the trend continues to go up. These things can't live in isolation. The API can't be an afterthought. It needs to be a first class design consideration when creating software.
As we've gone through those findings, right? Like there is definitely the realization that yes, APIs are the thing and will be growing, but there still is kind of the struggle of finding out how do we get better at actually
Yeah.
creating them at scale.
A litmus test for your viewers is whether you have the feature team and the API team. Whether the feature team goes and creates the feature and then kicks it over the wall to the API team to create an API, that's not an API first environment. And subsequently, the API will suffer because they don't have the domain expertise that the feature team did to go into that. So I know there's still organizations that are organized that way. There's an idea that, well, maybe we'll concentrate our API expertise in one area, and therefore, like, these people can keep doing their expertise. But I promise you, there is friction and a loss of fidelity once you toss over the wall like that.
I absolutely agree, and I know that a while ago there was I don't even know why I did it, but there was I think some blog post about API factories, and
Mm.
it somehow it turned into a little back and forth, and there was like this long debate. It's like, well, first the question is what it is it even? But this whole idea, it's a little bit like the model that you said, right? Like here are the feature people and here are the API people, and you just ship things over. And I do agree that this is probably not a good model. In particular, if in light of key finding number 5, quality is a top priority, right? And now we're getting to key finding number 7, which is your absolute favorite, I think. just making that up, which is being API first pays off.
So this is something that I brought to the report. When I joined Postman, I was very interested in seeing if we couldn't find strong correlations, strong signals to help API decision makers identify what are healthy behaviors in their landscapes, help them quantify these things and know whether the efforts that they're introducing are making things better or worse. So when it came to the survey, I encouraged the team to incorporate a number of questions to kind of test these hypotheses, and the results are better than I could have expected. In short, we see that API first teams are quicker to create APIs, they deploy more frequently, they have fewer failures, and they recover more swiftly when failures occur. So we asked teams to identify, like, are you API first? And out of a 10-point scale, we had approximately 8% of the respondents say, with either a 9 or a 10, yes, we're definitely API first. And then when we had the data, we asked people, like, okay, how long does it take you? Does it take you an hour, a day, a week, a month? How long does it take you to do these things? And then we combined those things. We said, okay, is there a difference between the general population and these API first people? Do they behave differently? Do they respond differently on these set of attributes? And lo and behold, yes, we see a correlation. The people that feel that they are API first outperform their peers when it comes to these key essential business value delivery drivers.
And I can tell that you are really passionate about this. And which is why I ask you, and I'm actually very much looking forward to that, right? That we spend more time discussing that in more depth, because I think it is really important. And it's something that a lot of also leaders in the API space, right? They will find that super interesting, because whatever makes teams more effective at getting their work done is a good thing. And if you have some hard data to prove that certain behaviors are beneficial, that's really interesting information. But as I said, we'll discuss that in more depth later on. Matthew, for today, I think we're done. I'd like to thank you so much for joining. As I said in the beginning, mostly what I wanted to do is really just spend a little bit of time with you, go over these key findings. So thanks a lot for doing that. Do you have any closing words in terms of, encouraging our viewers to go and check out the report and what they can find in it and why it helps them?
Right. Absolutely. So for people that are interested in checking this out, they should go to postman.com/state-of-API. If they go there, they can find the
I'll put
report.
it
As you
somewhere here,
mentioned,
the link.
it's free for download, and enjoy it there. If they need additional insight or want to talk about any of this, they can certainly find me online. I'm on Twitter. I write an email newsletter called Net API Notes, where I often discuss this stuff. This latest episode or issue out this week deals exactly with what we're talking about here. And you can sign up there at tinyletter.com/net API notes. And I'd love to keep this discussion going.
And I would like to encourage everybody to definitely subscribe to Matthew's Net API Notes. I think it's the greatest little thing out there in terms of noise to information ratio, which is it's really good. So everybody do that. Subscribe to Matthew.
Hear, hear.
Here, here. Okay. So once again, thank you very much, Matthew. And I'll ping you again to talk more about this API first stuff. I think it is really interesting, and it's something that people will be interested in. But for today, we're done. So thanks everybody for watching. I hope you got something out of that. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. And until next time, have a great day. Bye bye.